Good morning, this is your morning devotional from the Elim Church at Sunderland, and my name is Granville. I have a favourite poetess. I love the poems of a lady called Annie Johnson Flint, a wonderful Christian lady that went through a lot. She was born in 1866 in the town of Vineland in New Jersey in America. Not long after, within 3 years of her birth, sadly her mother died, giving birth to another child. And a little after, her father was classed as terminally ill, and he looked for someone to care for the children. And he took them to a distant relative, some nearby lady with her family, and they took them in. But it became too big a burden for them. The children were nothing but a burden for them. And sadly, Annie's father died, and the two children were orphaned. And there was a problem of where the children were going to go, and it looked very much like they'd be going into an orphanage. But a Mr. and a Mrs. Flint came to the rescue and took Annie and her sister in. And Mr. and Mrs. Flint were lovely, lovely people, godly Christians, and looked after Annie and her sister, adopted them as their own, and they grew up in a very happy, caring, loving home. They grew rapidly and matured. Annie became a Christian herself and lived for Jesus, and eventually trained as a school teacher and went into school teaching. Very successful, very much loved as a teacher. And in her late 20s, early 30s, Annie was diagnosed with painful arthritis, which eventually crippled her whole body, and she had to give up teaching and soon became bedridden. And in her 30s, bedridden, she didn't just lie there feeling sorry for herself, although in pain. She didn't lie there bemoaning her lot and why had God let her down and all sorts of stuff. But Annie began to write the most wonderful poetry and hymns. And she wrote lovely, lovely hymns like He Giveth More Grace. And her poetry and her hymns have been a blessing to Christians who've suffered down through the ages. And let me tell you, whatever you are suffering today, whatever you are going through, God knows. And God provides grace and help and strength. Annie wrote these words: what has God promised? God has not promised skies always blue, flower-strewn pathways all our lives through. God has not promised sun without rain, joy without sorrow, peace without pain. And a couple of verses down it says these words: but God has promised strength for the day, rest from the labour, light for the way, grace for the trials, help from above, unfailing sympathy, undying love. And Annie, in all her pain and in her suffering, she knew a God that cared for her, that strengthened her, that met with her, that gave her hope of something better. Annie died at the age of 66. Quite a long life, but most of it spent bedridden. But her faith and trust in a God that loved and cared shone through. And just like when the Apostle Paul went through trials and difficulties, and God spoke into his situation and said, my grace is enough for you, it's sufficient for you. So Annie knew that God's grace was enough. It was sufficient for her to go through all the trials she was going through. I suggest to you, look up her poetry, have a look, try and get hold of it. It's lovely stuff. And I would say to you today, dear friend, whatever you're going through, whether it's grief and sorrow, whether it's worry and fear, oh, dear friend, if it's rejection, whatever, trust the God that loves and cares. Trust the God whose grace is sufficient enough to meet your need. Let me pray with you. Father, I pray for whoever is watching. I pray for them as they go through difficulties, as they go through suffering, as they go through sorrow, as they go through worry and trials, that they will know you to be the God of all comfort, to be the God of all love and all care, all grace and mercy, that they will know that underneath are the everlasting arms, that you, God, will draw near to them and bless them and help you. Amen. Remember, my friend, God's grace is enough. It's sufficient. It was for Annie, it was for the Apostle Paul, and can be and will be for you if you just trust him. God bless you.